Black Kettle survived the Sand Creek Massacre in 1864. He carried white and American flags everywhere, believing they'd protect his people. But 4 years later, as 700 soldiers surrounded his sleeping village, those flags meant nothing. The shocking truth, as he and his wife fled across the Washita River. U.S. Army Scout Assad Trotter shot them both, then took Black Kettle's scalp as proof. This wasn't just a battle. It was the moment America's peace policy died in the blood-stained snow. A severe blizzard swept across the Indian Territory on November 25-26, 1868, depositing 8 inches of snow across the rolling plains. By nightfall on November 26th, temperatures plummeted to 18 degrees Fahrenheit. Through these harsh conditions, Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer led 800 men of the 7th U.S. Cavalry on a forced march from Camp Supply. Their Springfield carbines and Colt revolvers were kept dry under buffalo robes while cavalry horses struggled through knee-deep drifts. At 1 o'clock a.m. on November 27th, Osage scouts located Black Kettle's village, 51 lodges positioned in a tight cluster along a bend of the Washita River. By year 400, Custer had positioned his forces in 4 attack columns. He stationed Captain Lewis Hamilton with Companies A, C, and D on the village's eastern approach. Major Joel Elliott commanded Companies G, H, and M to the south. Captain William Thompson deployed Companies B and F to the west, while Captain Edward Myers positioned Companies E and I in the northern quadrant. The encirclement was methodical and silent. No fires were permitted. The night was inky dark, Lieutenant Edward Godfrey later wrote in his journal. We could barely see our hands before our faces, yet maintained formation by the sound of hooves on packed snow. At precisely 6:10 a.m., as the first gray light appeared on the eastern horizon, a rifle shot echoed from Black Kettle's camp. According to Melissa, Black Kettle's sister, who survived the attack, the chief was first to detect the cavalry's approach. She reported, Black Kettle jumped from his tepee with his Spencer rifle. He fired the first warning shots and called for warriors to defend the camp. Custer immediately signaled his regimental band. Despite temperatures cold enough to freeze the valves on their instruments, the musicians played Garryowen, the 7th Cavalry's attack signal. The 4 columns converged simultaneously. Captain Francis Gibson recorded, "We charged with relentless and overwhelming fury." The men knew their assignments precisely. Secure the pony herd, prevent warriors from reaching weapons caches, capture women and children alive. Scout Assad Trotter reported engaging Black Kettle directly. I spotted the chief and his wife attempting to flee on horseback toward the Washita River. I fired my Sharps carbine twice. Both fell. I later recovered his scalp to confirm the kill. Multiple Cheyenne witnesses contradicted this account, stating Black Kettle and his wife were shot mid-river by soldiers positioned on the opposite bank. Their bodies were later recovered downstream. Private Albert Barnett pursued 2 fleeing warriors, one armed with a Lancaster rifle, a distinctive British-made weapon provided by the Peace Commission the previous year. I chased them into a thicket, Barnett reported. The warrior with the Lancaster turned and fired. The bullet grazed my shoulder. I returned fire with my Springfield, hitting him in the leg before he escaped into deeper brush. Captain Frederick Benteen narrowly escaped death when a young Cheyenne boy, later identified as Blue Horse, Black Kettle's adopted son, emerged from behind a teepee and aimed a pistol at the officer. Benteen's official report stated, I was compelled to fire my Colt. The boy was no more than 12 years of age. I regret the necessity of this action. The boy died instantly from a bullet to the chest. By 7:30 a.m., the primary village resistance had been suppressed. Custer counted approximately 100 defenders killed, though this figure would later be disputed. His forces captured 53 women and children and secured 875 Indian ponies in rope corrals established north of the village. As Black Kettle's village fell to the 7th Cavalry, Major Joel Elliott observed groups of Cheyenne escaping southwest toward what scouts suspected were additional encampments. At approximately 7:45 a.m., Elliott assembled a volunteer pursuit force. Without seeking Custer's authorization, he gathered 16 men from Companies H and I, including Sergeants Walter Kennedy and Harry Mercer, Corporal William Cook, and 14 privates. "Here goes for a brevet or a coffin," Elliott shouted to Lieutenant Edward Godfrey as the detachment galloped away in pursuit. This declaration, referencing either battlefield promotion or death, would prove prophetic. P.K. Youngbird, a 14-year-old Cheyenne girl present during the attack, later provided testimony to the Indian Claims Commission. "The gunfire woke us. There was no time to dress. We ran in our sleeping clothes through the snow. I heard bullets hitting all around us and knew Longhair Custer was hunting Indians. Women and children fled toward the Washita River's frozen banks, seeking cover." According to Youngbird, soldiers were already positioned on both sides of the river. They fired down at anyone trying to cross. "I saw 3 women fall at once, then an old man carrying a child." Youngbird recalled, "Through all the gunfire, I could hear our women singing death songs. They knew there was no escape." Magpie, aged 15 at the time, stated, "The soldiers began firing before they could see clear targets. Most of our warriors had no time to recover weapons. My brother reached for his bow and was shot through the doorway of our lodge." Lone Wolf, another survivor, reported, "When we ran from our lodges, some soldiers signaled for us to come back. I fell to the ground and heard only gunfire above me. When the shooting stopped, a soldier struck me with his rifle butt and motioned for me to stand. I saw bodies everywhere, men, women, children." Elliott's detachment pursued Little Rock's band approximately 2 miles southwest of Black Kettle's village before encountering an ambush. Warriors from nearby Arapaho, Cheyenne, and Kiowa camps, alerted by escapees, converged on Elliott's small force. According to Scout Ben Clark, who later interviewed Cheyenne participants, the pursuing warriors numbered between 150 down to 200. Elliott's men were caught in open terrain, Clark reported. The Indians charged like a whirlwind and rode down the troopers like they were blades of grass. Elliott ordered his men to dismount in tall grass near a creek bend. The soldiers formed a defensive circle after their horses were either shot or stampeded. The physical evidence discovered when a recovery party reached the site on December 10th indicated Elliott's men fought from a 20-yard diameter position. Each soldier's body was found with empty cartridge casings from their Springfield carbines scattered around them. Ammunition pouches were empty, suggesting they fought until their last rounds. Cheyenne warrior Wolftooth later described the engagement. "The soldiers fought well. They killed 3 of our warriors before we overwhelmed them. When they ran out of bullets, we moved in with lances and war clubs." Sergeant Major Walter Kennedy's body was discovered halfway between Elliott's position and the village. Evidence suggested he had been sent back to alert Custer, but was intercepted by warriors. His horse was found shot, and defensive wounds on his hands indicated he fought with his Colt revolver until overwhelmed. Clark offered this assessment. Had Elliott been less aggressive and withdrawn when first challenged, they might have escaped. The warriors were hesitant to pursue soldiers back toward the main cavalry force. His decision to continue the pursuit sealed their fate. The bodies of Elliott and his 16 men remained undiscovered until December 10th, when Custer's forces returned to the Washita battlefield. All had been stripped, mutilated according to tribal custom, and left exposed to the elements and scavengers for nearly 2 weeks. By 8 a.m., the 7th Cavalry had secured complete control of Black Kettle's village. Soldiers moved lodge to lodge, lifting buffalo hide coverings, turning over sleeping mats, and digging through storage pits to capture 53 Cheyenne women and children. They stacked captured weapons in piles: 241 bows, 140 war axes, 473 arrows, 62 rifles and pistols, alongside wooden kegs of powder and lead balls. The regiment herded approximately 875 ponies into rope corrals north of the encampment. "We found ample evidence of hostile intent," Lieutenant Edward Godfrey scratched in his field journal. Each lodge contained bullet molds, powder measures, and fresh cast ammunition. Food stores filled rawhide containers to the brim, enough for extended campaigns. Lieutenant James Bell, quartermaster of the 7th Cavalry, arrived with the supply train at 8:30 a.m., having cracked his whip over the mules immediately upon hearing gunfire. Captain Francis Gibson noted, during his dash into the village, several wagon wheel hubs burst into flames from friction. The wooden axles smoked and charred. In Bell's teamsters lost 7 mules while forcing passage through thickets along the Washita River. At 10 a.m., Custer raised his field glasses and counted mounted warriors gathering on ridges approximately 1 mile from the village. Private Albert Barnett recorded, "Once the action began, warriors swarmed the hills like ants from disturbed mounds, each man bristling with bows, lances, and shields decorated with painted symbols. War bonnets of eagle feathers streamed behind them in the wind." Through his brass telescope, Custer identified warriors from multiple tribes, their paint patterns revealing Cheyenne, Arapaho, Kiowa, and Comanche, their numbers swelling minute by minute. Custer beckoned interpreter Romeo Romero to question the captive Melissa, sister of Black Kettle. She revealed critical intelligence. 5 more villages sit downstream, Arapaho under Little Raven, Kiowa under Satanta and Lone Wolf, and 3 Cheyenne camps. They camp within bugle call of each other. 6,000 warriors sleep in those lodges. This information triggered an immediate shift in Custer's expression. His force of 800 men faced odds of 7 to 1. At 11 o'clock a.m., Custer paced the perimeter of his position. The regiment had already wrapped 2 dead soldiers in blankets and bandaged 14 wounded men who lay shivering in wagons. Major Elliott and his detachment remained missing. Warriors circled the ridges on horseback, now numbering over 1,000 by head count. Custer gathered his company commanders behind an earthen breastwork hastily shoveled up on the central knoll. "Gentlemen, we face either a fighting withdrawal or encirclement," Custer told his officers, tapping his gloved finger on a field map. "We begin preparations now." Custer eyed the 875 captured ponies stamping in their rope corrals. Each animal required a guard, pulling men away from defense positions. If warriors recaptured them, each pony would carry a Cheyenne fighter in pursuit of his regiment. At 11:30 a.m., and he scribbled an order that he later described in his report as a cruel but necessary act, the complete destruction of the pony herd. Captain Myers barked orders that deployed his men in a line facing the corralled animals. Soldiers loaded their Springfield carbines, pressed the stocks against their shoulders, and aimed at point-blank range. On Myers' signal, they squeezed triggers and fired into the packed horses. Animals screamed and thrashed as bullets tore through flesh. Soldiers reloaded, advanced, and fired again into any animal still standing by 1 p.m. Over 700 horses and mules lay dead in the snow, their blood steaming in the cold air. Quartermaster Bell selected 175 stronger animals for carrying captives and supplies. From a hilltop 1 mile distant, Chief Magpie of the downstream Cheyenne village watched through a brass telescope traded from Mexican merchants. He later stated, "This sight boiled our blood. Warriors notched arrows and raised rifles, ready to charge, but our elders pointed to the women and children held at gunpoint by bluecoats. Any attack would bring death to our families." According to Magpie's testimony to Army investigators in 1869, the slaughter of our ponies struck us harder than bullets. Without horses, we could not hunt buffalo or move camp. When deep snow came, our people starved. At 2 p.m., Custer issued verbal orders to destroy the village. Soldiers ripped open the 51 lodges, dragged out buffalo robes, blankets, and food, and heaped them into wagons. They piled heavier items in the center of each teepee. Lieutenant Godfrey counted and listed 573 buffalo robes, 390 buffalo hides in various stages of tanning, 940 pounds of dried meat, 70 pounds of tobacco, and wooden crates of sugar and coffee from agency distributions. Inside the lodges, soldiers uncovered large iron pots filled with cooked buffalo meat and stacks of baked bread cooling on rawhide sheets, signs of preparation for warrior parties. They discovered leather pouches bulging with gunpowder, lead bars, and tin boxes of percussion caps. At 2:30 p.m., at Custer's signal, soldiers touched burning torches to each lodge. Flames licked up the dry buffalo hides and lodge poles, spreading from teepee to teepee within minutes. "The fire consumed everything," Captain Myers wrote later. "Black smoke rose hundreds of feet, twisting like a tornado. Through my field glasses, I watched warriors on distant ridges shake lances and howl as their winter homes vanished in flame." By 3 p.m., nothing remained of Black Kettle's village except blackened circles in the snow. The 7th Cavalry had eliminated a significant Cheyenne settlement, captured 53 non-combatants, destroyed the tribe's horses, and burned all winter provisions. These actions fulfilled General Philip Sheridan's directive. If a village is attacked and women and children killed, the responsibility lies not with the soldiers, but with the people whose crimes necessitated the attack. By 4:00 p.m., Custer faced a critical tactical dilemma. Over 1,500 warriors from downstream villages now occupied the surrounding ridges, their numbers increasing hourly. The 7th Cavalry, encumbered with 53 captives, 14 wounded men, and limited ammunition, risked encirclement if they remained stationary until nightfall. Custer summoned his officers behind the command post breastworks. He unfolded his field map marked with charcoal notations showing the positions of enemy warriors. "Gentlemen, we must break this encirclement before dark," Custer declared, tapping the map with his riding crop. "Standard withdrawal tactics will expose our rear to attack." At 4:30 p.m., with the winter sun hanging low, Custer implemented a deception plan. He ordered the captives loaded onto wagons near the center of his formation. Captain Myers positioned wounded soldiers among them, weapons concealed beneath blankets. Lieutenant Cook arranged the remaining cavalry in column formation, 4 men abreast, centered behind the regiment's flag. "Appear as if we intend to attack their main village downstream," Custer instructed his company commanders. "Every soldier must project confidence. The band will play at maximum volume." At Custer's signal, the regimental band struck up Garryowen. The column moved forward in parade ground precision toward the largest concentration of warriors on the southern ridge, directly opposite from their actual escape route. Sunlight glinted off brass instruments and the soldiers' drawn sabers. The regimental flag snapped in the wind at the column's head. "We move forward in one body," Custer later wrote, "with colors flying and band playing as if on review." From concealed positions across the Washita, a Cheyenne woman named White Buffalo Calf observed the cavalry advance through a gap between hills. She called to nearby warriors, "The soldiers are right across the river and are moving slowly. Let's shoot them." Yellow Bear, a senior warrior, grabbed her arm. "No, they hold our women and children in their wagons. Your bullets will kill our families first." Little Robe, a council chief, pointed toward the other villages. "The Bluecoats want us to attack here. Look how they display themselves like a wounded buffalo attracting wolves. This is a trap." The gathered warriors faced a critical decision. Medicine arrows passed among them as spiritual leaders conducted hasty prayers. After brief council, Iron Shirt announced their decision. "We cannot risk our captive families. Each band will return to protect its own village." Within minutes, warriors broke from their positions, riding hard toward their respective encampments. Scouts remained behind to watch the soldiers' movements, but the majority of fighting men galloped downstream to evacuate their camps. As twilight deepened at 5:45 p.m., Custer abruptly reversed his column's direction. The band fell silent, wagon wheels wrapped in canvas to muffle their sound. The column retraced its path through the burned village, then turned northeast, away from the downstream camps and toward Camp Supply. "We executed an about-face so quickly that the enemy scouts barely detected our movement," Lieutenant Godfrey recorded. The column accelerated to a trot once clear of the village site. By 7:30 p.m., darkness blanketed the prairie. Custer pushed his command 12 miles from the battleground before ordering a brief halt to rest horses and reorganize. The regiment resumed marching at 10:00 p.m., maintaining a steady pace through the night. Guards rode alongside each wagon containing captives, carbines loaded and ready. Meanwhile, the survivors of Black Kettle's village gathered on a hillside overlooking the smoking ruins. Makes good tracks. Black Kettle's daughter huddled with other women and children who had escaped during the initial attack. Through tears, she later recounted, "All our horses lay dead in heaps. A great smoke rose from our burning teepees and everything we owned for winter use. The snow turned red with the blood of our people and ponies. My mother and aunts unbraided their long hair and cut it short in mourning. Our cousins and relatives were gone, killed or taken prisoner to Camp Supply." The survivors faced immediate peril. Without horses, shelter, food, or weapons, they trudged through knee-deep snow toward the neighboring village, led by Little Rock. Women carried infants wrapped in whatever scraps of buffalo robes they had grabbed while fleeing. Children struggled through drifts, their moccasins soaked and frozen. 2 Moons, a 15-year-old boy who escaped by hiding in the riverbank, described their journey. "We walked all night. Old people fell behind and never caught up. My grandmother's feet froze black. The little children cried until they had no voice left. We ate snow and chewed on strips of hide from our clothing." They reached Little Rock's village before dawn on November 28th. Finding it abandoned, the inhabitants having fled south after hearing of Black Kettle's fate, the survivors scavenged abandoned food and materials. 5 days later, they joined a larger group of southern Cheyenne moving toward the Texas Panhandle. "We moved south to hunt buffalo," Makes Good Tracks recalled. The men fashioned new bows from ashwood and chipped stone points for arrows. The women scraped hides for new lodges and winter robes, but each night I heard my people cry for those taken by the Bluecoats. The attack on Black Kettle's village shattered the Southern Cheyennes' resistance. Without winter provisions, adequate weapons, or horses, many bands surrendered at Fort Cobb in the following weeks. Others, determined to maintain freedom, pushed deeper into the Llano Estacado of Texas, beginning a final, desperate phase of the Southern Plains Indian Wars. The 7th Cavalry marched for 4 days through snow-covered plains, covering nearly 100 miles from the Washita battlefield to Camp Supply. During the journey, Custer drafted his official battle report on a portable field desk each evening by lamplight. On November 29th, he finalized the casualty figures: 2 officers and 19 enlisted men killed in action, 14 wounded, and approximately 103 warriors killed. His report noted, "An unknown number of women and children fell victim to stray bullets during the engagement, unavoidable in such circumstances." Captain Albert Barnett entered different numbers in his private journal. "We counted 38 dead warriors within the village perimeter." Lieutenant Johnson reported additional bodies in the river and ravines, bringing our estimate to perhaps 70 enemy combatants killed. Lieutenant Edward Godfrey reported, "Our guide, California Joe, counted 83 dead Cheyenne males of fighting age. The bodies of women lay among them in at least 6 places I personally witnessed." Army Scout Ben Clark wrote to his father on December 1st, "The general's count of Indians killed exceeds what I saw with my own eyes. I tallied 43 warriors, 11 women, and at least 4 children dead before we departed." As the column approached Camp Supply on December 2nd, Custer ordered a final inventory of captives. 53 Cheyenne women and children remained under guard in the wagons. 2 elderly women had died during the march from exposure, their bodies wrapped in canvas and strapped to pack mules. The regiment's quartermaster tallied recovered property: 241 bows, 140 war axes, 473 arrows, 62 firearms, 573 buffalo robes, 390 tanned hides, 940 pounds of dried meat, and 175 captured ponies. Soldiers displayed these items on wagon beds as the column approached Camp Supply. At 2 p.m. on December 2nd, lookouts at Camp Supply spotted dust on the horizon. General Philip Sheridan climbed to the roof of his headquarters building, raised his brass telescope, and identified the approaching cavalry by their guidons. He ordered the garrison's band to assemble at the camp entrance. As the column entered view, James A. Hadley, a civilian contractor, watched from atop supply crates. He later described the scene. The splendid band of the 7th played Garryowen as riders approached in formation, their instruments flashing in the winter sun. Behind them came the prisoners, widows and orphans of Black Kettle's band, riding their own ponies. Troop after troop marched with the precision earned through long service. At the column's head rode a slender man of medium height, wearing a buckskin hunting shirt and fringed leggings. A worn, broad-brimmed hat topped a tangle of curling yellow hair that reached below his shoulders. Across his saddle lay a long rifle. This was Custer at 29 years old. General Sheridan stepped forward as Custer dismounted. Their handshake, witnessed by the entire garrison, signaled official approval of the Washita action. Sheridan ordered the captives housed in empty supply tents near the eastern perimeter, with female laundresses assigned to assist them. That evening, in his first comprehensive interview about the battle, Custer told reporter D.B., Randolph Keim of the New York Herald. The village harbored raiders who attacked settlers along the Saline and Solomon rivers. We recovered items stolen during those attacks, photographs, household goods, even children's toys, taken from families these warriors murdered. The casualty debate continued into subsequent decades. In 1911, George Bent, mixed-blood Cheyenne historian, compiled testimonies from survivors, documenting 40 warriors killed, alongside 12 women and 6 children. George Bird Grinnell's interviews with Cheyenne elders in the 1890s yielded similar figures. In 1996, the National Park Service Washita Battlefield Site, citing Cheyenne and Arapaho tribal records, placed the total Cheyenne dead at 60 individuals, including non-combatants. Military historians maintain Custer's attack represented legitimate warfare against combatants, while Cheyenne oral tradition describes it as an unprovoked massacre of a peaceful band. The evidence left in the snow that November morning supports elements of both narratives. General Philip Sheridan read Custer's battle report in his canvas-walled headquarters at Camp Supply on December 3rd. He underlined key passages with a red pencil, pausing to examine the map Custer had sketched showing Black Kettle's village and surrounding terrain. After an hour, Sheridan drafted Special Field Order No. 6. The energy and rapidity shown during one of the heaviest snowstorms of the season, Sheridan wrote, and the gallantry and bravery displayed resulting in such signal success deserves the highest commendation. The order specifically congratulated Brevet Major General George A. Custer and declared the Washita engagement the opening of the campaign against hostile Indians south of the Arkansas. Sheridan summoned Custer the following morning. "You've struck the first blow," he told him, spreading a larger map across his field desk. "Now we pursue them through winter quarters when they're most vulnerable. I'll accompany your next expedition myself." Custer's men rested for 5 days, repairing equipment and restocking ammunition. Cavalry horses stood in covered corrals, feeding on corn and hay hauled from Fort Dodge. On December 7th, buglers sounded assembly at dawn. The 7th Cavalry rode from Camp Supply with reinforcements, 10 companies of the 19th Kansas Volunteer Cavalry under Colonel Samuel Crawford. Newly arrived after a harrowing march through blizzard conditions, General Sheridan rode at the column's head, his red officer's sash visible against his dark blue winter coat. The combined force numbered nearly 1,500 men, including White Scouts, Osage, and Kaw trackers. Supply wagons carried rations for 30 days. Daniel Brewster, a civilian from Kansas, approached Custer's tent the night before departure. "My sister Anna was taken by Cheyenne raiders in August," he explained to the sentries. "I request permission to join your expedition." Custer invited him inside. "When was she captured?" he asked, pouring coffee into tin cups. "August 12th near Solomon River," Brewster replied. "Cheyenne raiders hit our homestead at dawn. They killed my father, burned our cabin, and took Anna." Custer nodded. "We have reason to believe 3 white women remain captives among the southern tribes. Your sister may be among them." He wrote a brief note and handed it to Brewster. "Report to Quartermaster Bell at first light. He'll issue you a mount, a Spencer carbine, and assign you as wagon driver." The column carried critical intelligence assets. 3 Cheyenne women captured during the Washita fight. Montecita, the 20-year-old daughter of Chief Little Rock, Melissa, Black Kettle's sister, and Sioux woman, believed to be Montecita's stepmother. Each woman rode in a separate wagon, guarded by soldiers, but treated as valuable informants rather than prisoners. "These women exposed the secrets of the chiefs," James Hadley noted in his journal. "They knew the winter camps, water sources, and hidden canyons where bands might shelter. Montecita especially proved valuable as she spoke some English learned from traders." George Bent, writing from the Cheyenne perspective, later explained, "The husbands and relatives of these women waited on the chiefs of all tribes. They begged that no war parties attack soldiers, as this would worsen treatment of the captives. For this reason, no raiding parties rode against the expedition." The column returned to the Washita battlefield on December 10th. They camped 3 miles from the burned village site. At dawn on December 11th, Custer led a small detachment to examine the area. Reporter Bonneville Keim rode alongside, later writing, as we approached the village remains. Thousands of ravens and crows lifted suddenly from the ground. The dense black mass passed overhead, momentarily blocking the sun. The scouting party found Elliott's remains first. The major and his 16 men lay where they had fallen 2 weeks earlier, their frozen bodies stripped of clothing and mutilated according to Plains warrior tradition. Elliott's right hand had been severed at the wrist and his left foot at the ankle, each appendage left attached by a tendon, marking him as a respected enemy. We counted 21 cartridge casings around each body position, Lieutenant Godfrey recorded. They fought until ammunition ran out. The patrol continued searching through the afternoon, eventually discovering the remains of Clara Blinn and her 2-year-old son Willie beneath an overhanging riverbank. Clara's body showed a bullet wound to the chest and scalping. The child's skull had been crushed against a tree trunk. Soldiers from the 19th Kansas identified her from descriptions circulated throughout Kansas settlements following her capture in October. Captain Barnett recovered a bundle of letters from Clara's dress pocket. One, addressed to any friendly scouts or soldiers, read, "Please help us if you can. Black Kettle promises kind treatment, but young men threaten us daily. We hear of troops in the area. Please rescue us before the village is attacked, as we will surely be killed in revenge." The discovery transformed the expedition's mood. Colonel Crawford assembled his Kansas volunteers that evening and read the letter aloud. "This confirms what we already knew," he told them. "The Indians murder captives when threatened. Our mission continues with greater urgency." On December 12th, after burying their dead comrades and the Blinn family, the expedition pushed southward. Custer increased scout patrols, seeking the next Cheyenne encampment with a force now hardened by discovery, and determined to end resistance on the southern plains before spring. At 7 a.m. on December 11th, Custer led a 40-man detachment back to the Washita battlefield. Snow still blanketed the ground, though winds had sculpted it into rippled dunes around the charred remains of Black Kettle's village. The soldiers fanned out in search parties, focusing first on locating Major Elliott and his missing men. Scout Ben Clark spotted crows circling 2 miles southwest of the village site. He signaled to Lieutenant Edward Godfrey, who redirected his search party toward a bend in the creek at 9:15 a.m. They discovered the bodies of Elliott and his 16 men arranged in a rough circle amid tall grass, now flattened by snow. Each man lay on his back, stripped of clothing, Godfrey recorded in his field book. Empty cartridge casings littered the area around each body, 21 brass shells per man by my count. Ben Clark examined Elliott's remains with professional detachment, later writing, "Elliott had been greatly admired by the Indians for his bravery long before the fight. They remembered this when he was dead and treated him as a valorous foe by severing his right hand at the wrists, and his left foot at the ankle, leaving each attached by a tendon. The bodies showed evidence of ritual treatment according to Plains warfare customs. Warriors had removed liver portions from each man and painted the faces with vermilion. Scalps had been taken with precise cuts. The soldiers' spines had been broken with war clubs to release spirits. These were not acts of savagery as portrayed in Eastern newspapers, Clark explained to reporter D.B. Randolph Keim. The warriors honored worthy enemies through specific rituals. Elliott received treatment reserved for respected opponents. Custer ordered the soldiers wrapped in wool blankets and canvas for transport back to Camp Supply. Frozen ground prevented proper burial at the site. The men worked in silence, their breath visible in the cold air as they loaded the bodies onto wagon beds. At 11:30 a.m., Private William Jackson from Company F shouted from the riverbank. He waved his hat to attract attention, pointing to an eroded hollow beneath the bank. Lieutenant Godfrey hurried to the spot, then sent a runner to fetch Custer. "Sir, we found them," Godfrey reported when Custer arrived. Under the overhang lay 2 bodies, a woman with long brown hair and a small child. Clara Blinn, aged 24, had been shot through the chest and scalped. Her 2-year-old son Willie lay beside her, his skull crushed against a nearby tree trunk. 3 soldiers from the 19th Kansas Volunteer Cavalry identified her immediately. "We distributed her photograph throughout Kansas settlements after her capture," Sergeant Thomas Daly explained, removing his hat as he stood over the bodies. She and the boy were taken on October 7th near Fort Lyon. Her husband Richard survived the attack and offered a $1,000 reward for their return. Captain Albert Barnett knelt beside the body and searched her clothing. From a pocket in her dress, he extracted a folded paper wrapped in oilskin to protect it from moisture. He handed it to Custer, who read it aloud. To any white scouts, soldiers, or settlers, I am held captive with my son in Black Kettle's camp. They promise fair treatment, but the young men threaten us daily. We hear troops are in the region. Please rescue us before any attack occurs, as we will surely be killed in revenge if the village is assaulted. I pray you find this message on Clara Blynn, October 23, 1868. The letter passed from hand to hand among the officers. Colonel Samuel Crawford of the 19th Kansas removed his hat and closed his eyes briefly before speaking. This confirms what we've suspected, he said. The Cheyenne kill captives when their villages face attack. We must inform families awaiting news. Custer tucked the letter into his dispatch book. This changes nothing about our attack's legitimacy, he told his officers. But it reinforces the urgency of our campaign to recover the remaining captives. Sheridan examined the battlefield personally that afternoon. He inspected items recovered from the village ruins: Army mules with U.S. brands, mail pouches taken from a murdered courier, framed photographs looted from homesteads on the Solomon, and saline rivers and children's toys still stained with the blood of their owners. Every item tells the same story, Sheridan wrote in his field journal. Black Kettle's so-called peace camp harbored raiders who participated in atrocities against settlers. The evidence lies before us. The discovery of Clara and Willie Blynn transformed the expedition's character. Soldiers who had questioned the attack on Black Kettle's village now viewed it through the lens of rescue operations. Fear for the two remaining white women still held captive, Sarah White and Anna Brewster Morgan, drove the campaign forward with renewed purpose. We ride not just to punish, but to save, Colonel Crawford told his men that evening. Every day we delay may cost another woman her life. The combined cavalry force departed the Washita battlefield on December 12th, heading southwest along the Washita River. Osage scouts rode ahead, tracking signs of Cheyenne, Kiowa, and Arapaho bands fleeing toward winter refuges. The column stretched nearly 2 miles across the prairie, its flanks protected by skirmish lines that changed hourly to maintain vigilance. We march with loaded carbines, Lieutenant William Cook noted in his journal. Every man watches the horizon, expecting attack from any ridgeline. The march averaged 15 miles daily through broken country. Scouts located abandoned campsites vacated hours or days before their arrival, evidence that news of Black Kettle's fate spread rapidly among the tribes. At night, the command formed tight defensive perimeters with wagons arranged in circles, horses picketed inside. On December 17th, advance scouts reported smoke from Fort Cobb chimneys visible on the horizon. The column approached the small wooden stockade the following day at 10 a.m., battle flags unfurled and band playing. Colonel William Hazen, commander of Fort Cobb, rode out with an escort to meet Sheridan and Custer. General, several tribal leaders await you inside, Hazen reported. Little Raven of the Arapaho and Satanta of the Kiowa have come in seeking peace terms. Sheridan nodded. We'll discuss terms after my men establish camp. At Fort Cobb, Captain Frederick Benteen reported to the post surgeon. He complained of severe stomach pain and fever, symptoms he attributed to the strenuous campaign conditions. The surgeon diagnosed gastric inflammation and confined him to quarters, prescribing bismuth salts and restricted diet. From his sickbed on December 22nd, Benteen penned a letter to Samuel Merrill, former comrade from the Civil War and editor of the Missouri Democrat. What began as a personal correspondence evolved into a scathing critique of the Washita battle and Custer's leadership. Who can describe the feeling of that brave band, Benteen wrote, as with anxious beating hearts they strained their yearning eyes in the direction when help should come. What must have been the despair when all hopes of succor died out, nerving their stout arms to do or die. But surely some search will be made for our missing comrades. No, they are forgotten. Over them and the poor ponies, the wolves will hold high carnival, and their howlings will be their only requiem. The letter explicitly accused Custer of abandoning Elliott's detachment, claiming he prioritized captured ponies and village destruction over searching for missing men. Benteen suggested Custer knew of Elliott's pursuit, but deliberately ignored his absence until too late. The Missouri Democrat published the letter on January 13, 1869. Copies circulated throughout Army posts and eastern cities, prompting questions about the Washita's status as a victory. When a newspaper clipping reached Fort Cobb, Benteen scrawled across its margin, "Who is fool enough to publish it?" The notation suggested he had not intended his private correspondence for publication. General Sheridan called Benteen to headquarters on January 16th. Though no record exists of their conversation, witnesses reported hearing raised voices. Benteen emerged pale-faced and returned directly to his quarters. Scout Ben Clark publicly contradicted Benteen's accusations in a statement to reporter D.B. Randolph Keim. Custer knew nothing of Elliott's departure until half an hour afterward, Clark stated. By then, Elliott was likely dead. "We faced thousands of warriors from downstream villages who would have overwhelmed any search party." Clark later confided to Lieutenant Edward Godfrey that Benteen had approached him 3 times, attempting to persuade him to corroborate his version of events. "Benteen asked me to state that Custer heard Elliott say, 'Here goes for a brevet or a coffin,' and permitted him to go," Clark revealed. This is false. Elliott gathered his men without authorization. Custer learned of it from me after the fact. The controversy divided the officer corps. Captain Myers, Lieutenant Cook, and Captain Thompson supported Custer, while elements of Benteen's H Company quietly validated their commander's accusations. The rift widened over subsequent years, culminating in Benteen's alleged hesitation to support Custer at Little Bighorn in 1876. Despite the gathering storm of criticism, the Washita campaign continued. On December 23rd, the cavalry conducted deliberate shows of force before Kiowa and Comanche representatives at Fort Cobb. Custer demonstrated howitzer fire, rapid carbine volleys, and cavalry charges for tribal leaders, emphasizing the futility of continued resistance. "Accept reservation life," Sheridan told Chief Satanta through an interpreter, "or face the same fate as Black Kettle." The remaining Cheyenne bands had fled south toward the Texas Panhandle. On December 24th, Custer prepared to pursue them with 11 companies of the 7th Cavalry, leaving the wounded and ill at Fort Cobb under Benteen's nominal command, effectively separating the increasingly hostile captain from the main expedition. The 7th Cavalry departed Fort Cobb on December 26th, marching south along Cache Creek. 11 cavalry companies stretched across the winter landscape, accompanied by 20 supply wagons and a 4-gun battery of mountain howitzers. Custer pushed the men forward despite dwindling rations and temperatures that plunged to 12 degrees at night. On December 28th, Osage scouts reported a large Kiowa village 8 miles ahead. Custer halted the main column and rode forward with companies C and D, plus interpreter Romeo Romero. They crested a ridge at noon to find 150 lodges arranged in a semicircle along a sheltered streambed. Warriors on horseback patrolled the perimeter. "I need to speak with Satanta," Custer told Romero. "Signal for a parley." Romero waved a white cloth tied to his rifle barrel. 3 mounted Kiowa approached, led by a warrior in a buffalo robe decorated with porcupine quills. The warriors halted 30 yards away, hands resting on rifle barrels across their saddles. "Tell them I wish to talk peace," Custer instructed Romero. "Invite Satanta and Lone Wolf to our camp for a council." The warriors conferred, then nodded agreement. At 4 p.m., Satanta and Lone Wolf rode into the cavalry camp, accompanied by 12 warriors. The chiefs wore their finest regalia, eagle feather headdresses, beaded buckskin, and multiple strands of trade beads. They dismounted before Custer's tent, where he waited with his officers. "Ask why they fled Fort Cobb after promising to remain," Custer instructed Romero. Satanta, a powerfully built man with a booming voice, spoke for 10 minutes, gesturing animatedly. Romero translated, He says winter buffalo hunting required them to move. They still desire peace, but must feed their people. Custer listened, sipping coffee. When Satanta finished, Custer stood and approached the chiefs. "Tell them I know they participated in raids on settlements," he ordered Romero. "Tell them they will return with me to Fort Cobb immediately or face the same fate as Black Kettle." As Romero translated, Custer signaled Captain Myers. 40 soldiers surrounded the Kiowa delegation, carbines leveled. Satanta reached for his knife, but froze when 3 rifle barrels pressed against his chest. "You are now my prisoners," Custer announced. "Your people must surrender at Fort Cobb within 2 days, or I will hang you both from that cottonwood." He pointed to a tall tree visible from the council site. Satanta and Lone Wolf exchanged glances. "We will send runners to our people," Satanta replied through Romero. "They will come." Custer confiscated their weapons and placed both chiefs under guard in a supply wagon. 4 warriors received permission to return to the village with Custer's ultimatum. By December 31st, the entire Kiowa band arrived at Fort Cobb, led by women carrying infants. They surrendered 147 horses, 32 rifles, and established camp under Army supervision. Satanta and Lone Wolf remained under guard until January 7th, when Custer released them after their compliance was confirmed. The Indian question, so far as the Kiowa are concerned, is settled for the time being, Custer wrote to General Sheridan. However, the Cheyenne remained defiant. Intelligence from Osage scouts indicated the remaining Cheyenne had fled southwest, establishing winter camps somewhere between the Wichita Mountains and the western Texas border. Through January and February 1869, the 7th Cavalry conducted multiple reconnaissance missions, but snow-covered trails and the Cheyennes' scattered movement patterns foiled attempts to locate them. On March 2, 1869, Custer prepared a new approach from Fort Sill, which had replaced Fort Cobb as the expedition's base. He summoned Melissa, Black Kettle's sister, to his headquarters tent. "Your people are scattered and starving," he told her through interpreter Romero. "Winter is ending. Soon the grass will grow, ponies will strengthen, and war will resume. This is your chance to prevent more bloodshed." Melissa, dressed in Army-issued woolen clothing, nodded silently. Though initially hostile after her capture, 4 months of relatively respectful treatment had earned her conditional trust. "I'm sending you with Walking Bird," Custer continued, indicating an Apache chief who had surrendered weeks earlier. "Find your people. Tell them they must cease hostilities and come to Fort Sill. Tell them we hold 2 white women captive and will exchange them for the women." Melissa listened carefully to Romero's translation. "I will tell them," she finally replied, "but they may not listen. Young men want revenge for Black Kettle." At dawn on March 3rd, Melissa and Walking Bird rode from Fort Sill with 3 days' rations and a written message from Custer offering peace terms. 4 Osage scouts accompanied them for the first 10 miles, then returned to report the mission underway. "She'll either bring them in or join them," muttered Ben Clark to Lieutenant Godfrey as they watched the small party disappear into the southwestern horizon. Melissa never returned to Fort Sill. Whether she found her people and chose to remain, delivered the message but was prevented from returning, or met with harm, remains unknown. Her disappearance confirmed Custer's assessment that the Cheyenne remained beyond immediate reach. By mid-March, the winter campaign had stretched the 7th Cavalry to its limits. Many troopers had served continuously since November 1868, enduring blizzards, sub-zero temperatures, and increasingly meager rations. Cavalry horses grew gaunt as forage dwindled. Supply lines stretched thin across 200 miles of hostile territory. "The men ate corn meant for horses," Sergeant John Ryan recorded in his journal on March 15th. "Yesterday we butchered 2 worn-out mules. The meat tastes stringy, but fills empty stomachs." Custer recognized his narrowing window of opportunity. When spring grass grows, the Indians' ponies regain strength, he told his officers during a council on March 16th. "They'll scatter into small bands impossible to track. We must locate their main camp within 3 weeks." In this desperate phase, Washita, the 20-year-old daughter of Chief Little Rock, captured at Washita, proved invaluable. Unlike the escaped Melissa, Washita developed a working relationship with the cavalry. Sergeant John Ryan noted that she speaks English with surprising quality, having learned from traders who visited her father's camp. On March 18th, scouts discovered an abandoned Cheyenne campsite along a small tributary of the Red River. Custer brought Washita to examine the site before trailing scents dissipated. No detective could have conducted a more thorough examination, Custer later wrote in his memoir, My Life on the Plains. Washita circled the campsite, counting fire pits and lodgepole markings in the soil. She knelt to examine deer and antelope bones scattered among the ashes. She cracked several bones between stones, examining the marrow quality. The color and consistency of bone marrow revealed crucial information about when animals had been killed and consumed. After 20 minutes of inspection, she delivered her assessment. These lodges left no more than 2 weeks ago, she told Custer in halting English, pointing southeast. 42 lodges. Many women, few men. They move toward meeting place where all Cheyenne gather when moon becomes full. Her precision impressed even skeptical officers. When Custer asked how she determined the departure time frame, Washita demonstrated by breaking another bone. Fresh marrow still yellow, she explained. Old marrow turns brown, then black, this yellow with brown edge. 10-12 days. For the next week, the 7th Cavalry followed trails identified by Washita and Osage scouts. On March 25th, near present-day Sweetwater Creek in the Texas Panhandle, Custer rode ahead with Company D to scout a promising valley. At 10:30 a.m., from a ridge overlooking a creek bed, Custer raised his field glasses and froze. 50 mounted Indians watched the cavalry column from a distant hillside. Their paint patterns and shield designs identified them as Cheyenne. "It's them," Custer whispered to Lieutenant Cook, "the same band that held Clara Blinn." Custer recalled the fate of Clara and her son, killed when their captor's village faced attack. Intelligence gathered from Washita indicated 2 white women remained captive among this band. Sarah White and Anna Brewster Morgan, both captured during raids the previous summer. "If we attack, they'll kill the women first," Custer told Cook. "If we let them escape, spring grass will strengthen their ponies and we'll lose them until the next winter." Custer weighed his options while scanning the surrounding terrain. The main body of his cavalry remained 30 minutes behind him. The Cheyenne observers maintained their position, apparently assessing the soldiers' strength. Lieutenant Cook pointed to dust clouds rising behind them. "The regiment approaches, sir. Another 20 minutes, and we'll have overwhelming force." Custer lowered his field glasses and made his decision. "The first shot fired will signal the white women's execution. We must negotiate before fighting becomes inevitable." Custer made his decision at Sweetwater Creek. Rather than waiting for his regiment to arrive in force, he trotted forward with Lieutenant William Cook toward the watching Cheyenne warriors. The lieutenant gripped his revolver, keeping it concealed beneath his buffalo coat. "Sir, this is reckless," Cook whispered. "They could kill us both before our men could intervene." Custer ignored the warning and raised his right hand, palm forward, in the universal peace sign. 3 Cheyenne warriors broke from their group and rode toward the officers. They stopped 10 yards away, rifles across their laps. "Ha todavu otsa," Custer said, using the Cheyenne greeting he had learned from Washita. "Take me to your chief." The warriors exchanged glances, clearly surprised by Custer's boldness and partial command of their language. After a brief discussion among themselves, they motioned for Custer and Cook to follow. The warriors escorted them over 2 ridgelines to a village of 42 lodges nestled in a protected valley. Women paused in their work to stare at the blue-coated soldiers. Children ducked behind lodge flaps. The warriors led Custer directly to a large teepee decorated with painted images of arrows and buffalo. They dismounted and gestured for Custer to enter. Inside the dimly lit lodge sat Chief Stone Forehead, whom Custer later called Medicine Arrows in his memoir. The elderly chief wore a simple buckskin shirt decorated with porcupine quills. Behind him, on a buffalo hide backrest, hung 4 arrows wrapped in fox fur, the sacred medicine arrows of the Cheyenne people. Without interpreter Romeo, who remained with the main column, Custer relied on hand gestures and his limited Cheyenne vocabulary. He accepted a pipe passed by Stone Forehead and smoked it according to proper protocol, turning the stem in 4 directions before inhaling. For 30 minutes, the two men communicated through gestures and shared tobacco. Stone Forehead's expression remained neutral, though his eyes constantly assessed the cavalry officer. When the pipe ceremony concluded, Custer stood and indicated he wished to return to his troops. Stone Forehead nodded and appointed 2 warriors to escort him. Back at his command post, Custer immediately summoned Washita from the supply wagons. "I've located a Cheyenne village," he told her. "I need to know if the white women captives are there." Washita listened carefully, then replied in her halting English, "This village belongs to Stone Forehead. He is keeper of sacred arrows. Very important chief." She paused, then added, "2 white women there. I see them when walking through camp with you." "You saw them? Why didn't you signal me?" Custer demanded. "They watch us," Washita explained. "Women kept in separate lodges, guards always near. I can help bring them out." At 4 p.m., approximately 50 Cheyenne warriors rode into the cavalry camp. Chief Stone Forehead led them, accompanied by 3 other chiefs later identified as Big Head, Fat Bear, and Wolf Tongue. The warriors carried no firearms, only decorated lances and shields, suggesting peaceful intent. The Cheyenne riders formed a semicircle before Custer's tent and began an elaborate demonstration of horsemanship. Warriors stood on galloping ponies, leaped from one mount to another, and fired arrows at targets while riding at full speed. Others played bone flutes and beat small hand drums, creating music to accompany the display. "Impressive performance," Lieutenant Cook commented. "They're demonstrating their skills and culture." Custer watched with apparent appreciation, applauding at appropriate moments. But his eyes continually scanned the ridgeline behind the village. "They're stalling," he whispered to Captain Myers. "The women and children are probably packing the village. By nightfall, they'll be gone." When the demonstration concluded, Custer invited Stone Forehead and the other chiefs to share coffee and hardtack. The chiefs dismounted and approached the officers' mess area, their warriors remaining mounted 30 yards back. As the chiefs accepted tin cups of coffee, Custer gave a subtle hand signal. Captain Myers and 20 soldiers immediately surrounded the 4 chiefs, leveling carbines at their chests. The mounted warriors reached for weapons, but froze when they saw their leaders captive. "Tell them they are my prisoners," Custer instructed Romeo, who had arrived with the main column. "Tell them I know they hold 2 white women in their village. They will remain my prisoners until the women are released and their people agree to move to the reservation." Stone Forehead listened impassively to the translation, then spoke briefly. Romeo translated. "He says taking chiefs prisoner while under peace talk is dishonest. He says you smoke pipe under sacred arrows, then break word." "Tell him I keep my word about peace," Custer replied. "But first, they must return what doesn't belong to them, the white women." Custer released Stone Forehead after an hour of negotiations, instructing him to return to the village and bring the captive women. The other 3 chiefs remained under armed guard. The experience at Pawnee Fork in 1867, when surrounded Cheyenne had escaped during the night despite Army encirclement, had taught Custer to maintain leverage. "If your village disappears during the night," Custer warned Stone Forehead through Romeo, "these chiefs will pay with their lives." Stone Forehead mounted his pony and rode toward his village, his warriors following at a distance. 3 days passed with no sign of Stone Forehead or the white captives. Custer maintained his camp within sight of the Cheyenne village, which showed continued activity despite the chief's captivity. Scouts reported women gathering wood and water, suggesting the band had not fled. The 3 captive chiefs, Big Head, Fat Bear, and Wolf Tongue, remained under guard in a tent near Custer's headquarters. They accepted meals but refused conversation with Romeo or Washita. On the 3rd day, Custer summoned them for a final ultimatum. He led the chiefs to a tall cottonwood tree standing alone on the prairie. Soldiers tossed a rope over a sturdy branch, fashioning a hangman's noose at its end. Custer placed the loop around Big Head's neck while Romeo translated his words. "Tell them if the white women are not delivered by sunset tomorrow, all 3 will hang from this tree," Custer instructed. Romeo hesitated. "Sir, hanging is especially terrible to the Cheyenne. They believe—" "I know their beliefs," Custer interrupted. Tell them exactly what I said." The Cheyenne believed that hanging prevented a warrior's spirit from escaping through the mouth upon death. A broken windpipe trapped the soul forever in the decomposing body, a fate worse than any physical torture. Big Head stood rigid as the noose touched his skin. His expression remained stoic, but sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool March air. After Romeo translated, the chief spoke a single sentence. "He says stone forehead will bring the women," Romeo reported, "but negotiating takes time when it involves property of individual warriors." Custer removed the noose from Big Head's neck. "They have until sunset tomorrow, not a minute longer." The following day at 5:30 p.m., with the sun hanging low over the western horizon, sentries spotted movement on a distant ridge. Two figures on a single pony approached slowly from the direction of the Cheyenne village. "Rider coming in," the sentry called. "Looks like two people on one horse." Officers and soldiers gathered to watch. The lone pony carried two women, their light skin and long hair immediately identifying them as the captives. A young Cheyenne warrior led the horse by its bridle, stopping approximately 200 yards from camp. He helped the women dismount, then immediately galloped back toward the village. The women clutched each other as they walked toward the cavalry camp. One appeared unable to walk unaided, leaning heavily on her companion. Daniel Brewster broke from the crowd, running toward the approaching figures. "Anna!" he shouted. "Anna!" The taller woman looked up at the sound of her name. She stood frozen for a moment, then released her companion and ran toward Brewster. The siblings embraced in the tall grass midway between the cavalry camp and the point where the Cheyenne had left them. Soldiers escorted both women to the medical tent, where the regimental surgeon examined them. Sarah White, the younger captive, suffered from malnutrition and infected wounds on her feet. Anna Brewster Morgan appeared in better physical condition, but remained withdrawn and silent. Custer visited the women after the doctor completed his examination. In his subsequent report, he described White as a woman who, though not beautiful, had an interesting face. Of Anna Brewster Morgan, he wrote, "She would have been pronounced beautiful by the most critical judge, being of such a type as one might imagine Maud Muller to be." The women received fresh clothing, food, and medical attention. As they passed the tent where the three chiefs remained captive, Anna Brewster Morgan lunged unexpectedly toward a soldier, attempting to grab his carbine. "Let me kill him!" she shouted, pointing at Chief Big Head. "He's the worst Indian in the whole tribe. He killed Lieutenant Kidder and his men." Two soldiers restrained her while she continued shouting accusations about Big Head's involvement in the 1867 Kidder massacre, when a lieutenant and 10 men were killed while carrying dispatches. Despite the women's rescue, Custer maintained custody of the three chiefs. "They remain our insurance," he told his officers. "We'll release them only after their people report to the reservation." In a dispatch to General Sheridan, dated March 31, 1869, Custer expressed satisfaction with the mission's outcome. In obtaining the release of the captive white women, and that too without ransom or loss of a single man, the men of my command, and particularly those of the 19th Kansas, who were called into service owing to the murders and depredations of which the capture of these women formed a part, feel more than fully repaid for the hardships they have endured than if they had survived an overwhelming victory over the Indians. The 7th Cavalry broke camp on April 1st, beginning the long march back to Fort Hays. The column moved slowly, accommodating Sarah White's poor health and the weakened condition of cavalry horses. Washita and the three Cheyenne chiefs rode in army wagons under guard, their expressions stoic as they left their homeland behind. After 6 days of travel, they reached Fort Sill, where Custer filed his official report with General Philip Sheridan. The expedition continued northward, arriving at Fort Hays on April 7th. The fort's garrison band played Garryowen as Custer led his exhausted command through the gates. Crowds gathered to witness the return of the rescued white women and captured Cheyenne leaders. At Fort Hays, Washita and the three chiefs joined other Cheyenne captives transferred earlier from Camp Supply. The prisoners occupied a stockade measuring 186 feet long by 58 feet wide, enclosed by 14-foot walls with an external guard walk. Inside, the Cheyenne lived in teepees, captured during the Washita battle. On April 20th, George Custer escorted his wife Elizabeth "Libby" Custer to the stockade. Libby had traveled from their home in Monroe, Michigan, to join her husband now that active campaigning had ceased. She recorded her impressions of the Cheyenne captives in her memoir, Following the Guidon. Of Washita, Libby wrote, "The princess, the ranking woman among them all, being the daughter of Chief Little Rock. During the winter, her intelligence and judgment had been of service in attempts to bring the tribes to surrender. She was young and attractive," acknowledged Bell among the Indian maidens. Washita's face had the beauty of youth, whose dimples and curves and rounded outlines are always charming. Washita let her blanket fall from her glossy hair. Her white, even teeth gleamed as she smiled, and the expression transfigured her. Libby also noted Washita's son, describing him as a cunning little brown velvet bundle with bright eyes, who stayed close to his mother. Peaceful routine at Fort Hays continued until June 13th, when tragedy struck. A detachment of 5th Infantry soldiers attempted to move the 3 Cheyenne chiefs, Big Head, Fat Bear, and Wolf Tongue, from the stockade to another location. Without an interpreter present, the chiefs misunderstood the soldiers' intentions and believed they faced execution. Big Head grabbed a knife hidden in his legging and slashed at Private Michael Delaney. Other prisoners joined the resistance. In the ensuing chaos, soldiers fired into the stockade. One infantry officer reported, "The situation deteriorated instantly. Chiefs attacked guards while women screamed and ran for cover. Shots fired through the gate struck multiple individuals. When order restored, an Army physician counted casualties. Private Delaney suffered non-fatal stab wounds. Chief Big Head laid dead from multiple gunshot wounds. Chief Fat Bear sustained a severe shoulder wound, and one Cheyenne woman suffered a minor injury. Washita escaped harm, though a bullet hole appeared in the blanket she clutched around her shoulders. Following this incident, authorities decided to release the remaining Cheyenne captives. On June 24th, Army wagons transported the survivors, including Washita, her son, Chief Wolf Tongue, and the wounded Chief Fat Bear, to their designated reservation area near Camp Supply. The military provided canvas-topped wagons, basic supplies, and an escort of 20 cavalrymen. The winter campaign of 1868 to 69 effectively ended organized Cheyenne resistance on the southern plains. Scattered bands continued intermittent raids for another decade, but the cohesive fighting force of the southern Cheyenne never recovered from the Washita attack and subsequent winter pursuit. By July 1869, the Cheyenne captives from Washita returned to designated reservation lands near Camp Supply. Washita's casualties remain disputed in Army records. Either Custer's count of 103 warriors or Cheyenne accounts of 40 warriors plus 18 women and children. The battle secured Custer's reputation among military leaders while fueling controversy among civilians. Physical evidence collected at the village, stolen photographs, Army property, settler belongings, validated military claims about raiders among Black Kettle's band. The Washita tactics, winter attacks on villages, destruction of food supplies, and taking of hostages, became standard Army procedure across the plains, permanently altering tribal resistance capabilities and accelerating the reservation system's implementation throughout the West.